This is In the Loop. I'm Cody LaGrow in for Christian Bryant, and Texas is in the spotlight this week. The tragic shooting there has already reignited a national discussion around what can be done to prevent future mass shootings in schools. Now, it's no secret Texas is one of the states with the least restrictive gun laws in the country. Last year, Governor Greg Abbott signed more than 20 pieces of legislation making it easier to buy, carry, and own guns in the state. But there's also been some changes in the state's mental health care resources. So with Texas at the center of national debate on guns and mental health, we want to start the show by unpacking a few relevant changes made in the policies and funding around both. Since September 2021, most Texans have been allowed to carry handguns in public without going through training or having a permit, as long as they're over 21, are not already prohibited by law from owning a firearm, or haven't been convicted of a felony or domestic violence. Governor Abbott signed this constitutional carry bill into law last summer. Now over 20 states have permitless carry in the U.S.
We are pushing back against this narrative across America, where people are saying, from the federal level to the local level, that Second Amendment rights are under assault, that government officials are saying, heck yes, government is coming to take your guns. Texas will not let that happen.
Pro-gun activists had been pushing for permitless carry in Texas for years, but it hadn't gained much traction before. But when the 2021 legislative session began, after the mass shooting at an El Paso Walmart and a shooting spree in Midland and Odessa, Texas, the state legislatures decided to move forward and give people easier access to guns. The thing is, most Texas voters opposed the idea of letting people carry handguns in public without a license. A University of Texas and Texas Tribune poll found that 59% of voters were against it. Along with the permitless carry bill, other pro-gun laws were passed, like one that allows community college marshals to carry concealed guns rather than storing them, and another that allows school marshals in grade schools to do the same. While these laws have made it easier for someone to carry a gun in public, we can't necessarily point to any of these being a factor in what allowed the tragedy in Uvalde to take place. There is another law from Texas that's been making headlines considering the shooter's age. In the state of Texas, people 18 or older are allowed to buy a long gun, like an AR-15. As Abbott pointed out this week, those rifles have been legal to purchase for a long time. And dozens of other states allow this too.
So the ability of an 18-year-old to buy a long gun has been in place in the state of Texas for more than 60 years. And think about during the time over the course of that 60 years, we have not had episodes like this.
The 18-year-old shooter in Uvalde, Texas, legally bought the weapon used in the tragic attack. Texas State Rep. Jarvis Johnson is requesting Abbott call a special session on gun reform, including raising the age limit for purchasing long guns to 21. But the age requirements for other types of guns, like handguns, are a little more complicated. Last year, Texas lawmakers signed legislation allowing people ages 18 to 20 to obtain handgun permits under specific court orders. But experts say generally, the minimum age to carry a handgun in Texas is 21. The exceptions allowing someone who's 18 to 20 to carry a handgun are very specific. The permit is only available if the young person has a restraining order and is in danger. Gun violence prevention advocates say that data shows young people disproportionately commit gun homicides. While 18 to 20-year-olds make up just 4% of the U.S. population, they account for 17% of known homicide offenders. We are still learning about the shooter's motives in the Uvalde school shooting, but the governor has stood firm in his stance that stronger gun controls is not what is needed. Instead, he and other gun advocates in the state point to another factor.
I asked the sheriff and others an open-ended question and got the same answer from the sheriff as well as from the mayor of Uvalde. The question was, what is the problem here? and they were straightforward and emphatic. They said, we have a problem with mental health illness in this community.
When it comes to mental health care, Texas does not exactly have the best tools available for those who might need it. Currently, it ranks last out of all 50 states and the District of Columbia for overall access to mental health care. That's according to the 2021 State of Mental Health in America report. And despite that, mental health has not been a budget priority for Texas leadership. Back in April, Abbott actually cut more than $200 million from the department that oversees mental health programs. As we've mentioned on this show before, experts caution against pinning mass shootings on mental health, and rates of mental health disorders in the U.S. aren't as high as in other countries where mass shootings are rare. As the Educational Fund to Stop Gun Violence found, just 4% of interpersonal violence cases in the U.S. are attributable to serious mental illness alone. In the aftermath of mass shootings like the one in Uvalde on Tuesday, we're often left with a lot of questions, especially when it comes to understanding why the shooter did this. As we continue to investigate, one of the unfortunate realities of mass shootings is they create an ecosystem that fosters the creation of false information and conspiracy theories, which can then spread across various social media sites like wildfire. The Uvalde shooting was no different. Newsy's Tyler Atkinson brings us more.
One of the unfortunate realities of mass shootings is they create an ecosystem where false information and conspiracy theories flicker to life. They then spread like wildfire across social media. The Uvalde shooting was no different.
These are extremely emotional news events that are steeped in violence and in politics. And misinformation thrives when rage and anxiety are high, because when people are at their most vulnerable, when they are upset or anxious, they're less likely to verify something before they share it online.
There's moments when there are these extreme irrational events. Is another moment where people have this sort of vacuum of understanding that they are looking to have filled, and the first and fastest sources to do that are often where they will turn to.
Often, mass shooting events are used by mis and disinformation spreaders to vilify their ideological opponents. As information about the Uvalde shooter's identity trickled out, several far-right-wing trolls on 4chan began falsely accusing the shooter of being transgender, going as far as circulating photos of a transgender woman who was uninvolved with the shooting and falsely IDing them as a culprit. That falsehood gained extra traction after mainstream political figures like Arizona Representative Paul Gosar tweeted about it. In that same now-deleted post, he also falsely accused the shooter of being an undocumented immigrant.
Right-wing figures have become very good at pushing out that content that the algorithms are going to reward and help amplify. And they have such large audiences that they amplify these claims to these large audiences. But it follows a pattern that we frequently see, where we go from fringe platforms to more mainstream platforms like Facebook, to then these right-wing figures that amplify it.
Routinely, the false claims made by these figures are rehashed from previous tragedies. Hours after the Uvalde shooting, several far-right figures claimed the event was a false flag, like they did for the Buffalo shooting. Their followers picked those claims up and spread them further.
I think in the case of this shooting, right-wing media and figures, they're able to use social media to kind of shift away the conversation from guns towards topics that tap into pre-existing transphobia, xenophobia, and racism that they've already primed their audiences to react to.
Experts told Newsy that the consequences of these mis and disinformation spreads about major tragedies have hit a point where it's damaging individual communities and democracy.
There's a pretty good amount of people that consumed news, false news, about the shooter potentially being an illegal immigrant. Now, they may have logged off of social media, forgot all about it. And then when it comes time to vote, they are more vulnerable to even more mis and disinformation about illegal immigrants, because in their head, they still have that piece of false information tied to that shooting.
Tyler Atkinson, Newsy, Chicago.